Not yet.
The theory of plate.
Okay.
We need to get the cardigan.
I'm gonna fail this.
Here we go. So, you have been hearing, I have been hearing you make some connections, which is awesome. Understanding that, these are real things, this is part of our earth. So yeah, some of these ideas are gonna be things that you recognize. So a lot of this unit is about earthquakes and things that are caused because of plate boundaries. I like this map. You can see, so these little dots are kind of showing where the plates are. Notice that they kind of go around continents, but they're not necessarily like the exact same as the continent. So I think, Zach, you had said, isn't the African plate the continent of Africa? Well, this actually is the African plate, and the continent of Africa definitely is on that. Not all of the plates are named for the continents that are on them, but some of them are. I am not gonna have you memorize what the plates are. I'm more worried about you understanding what kind of things happen at the plates and at plate boundaries specifically. And so looking up the plates is something that you can always just look up. You know, I'm not gonna specifically say, where's the African plate or where's the North American plate? That's more of a kind of a geography type thing. We're more interested in what's going on at those plates, because some really exciting and fantastic things happen. Some good, some bad. Actually in the news, I saw on the news last night that there were 2 more earthquakes that hit in Romania. So things are very active in our lithosphere right now, across the world. So Turkey and Syria had an earthquake that was like 7.8 the week before. And then this week there have been 2, like 5, I think they said 5.3 and 5.7 magnitude of earthquakes. And so earthquakes are measured on that Richter scale, and then we call the magnitude the size. So 10 is the absolute biggest that, you know, on the scale, and then obviously 1 would be the lowest. Yes?
Isn't that bad?
So, you know, you get into the 6s and 7s and you're gonna have some serious damage. 5s, there is damage, but they said that nobody lost their life, which is, you know, obviously a good thing. But there's still, you know, it's still, you know, significant enough that you're feeling it for sure. So again, this whole unit is gonna use everything that we've already talked about and already learned with our layers. So the idea that the convection currents take place in the asthenosphere, and that the lithosphere includes the upper mantle and the crust that is resting on that upper mantle. And so we watched the Bill Nye on Friday, and I like to do it at the end of last unit and the beginning of this one, because it does introduce some of these ideas. And so if you remember his little campfire of science, where he had that that big kind of plate or tub kind of over the fire, and then the plates were on it, and then they started moving as they heated up, trying to show the convection currents. That's kind of what these plates are. All right, so it's basically the lithosphere broken up into these chunks, right? And so those chunks are floating on the asthenosphere, which we know is moving because of the convection currents within them. So everything that we've already talked about still continues into this unit. This is another good picture. You can see, you know, it's trying to show you like, hey, there is motion, there's action, there's heat. There's a lot of things going on beneath our quiet, calm crust that causes, it's the only explanation for why we have volcanoes, why we have hot springs, why we have geysers, why we have a lot of earthquakes, why we have a lot of features. Otherwise, there'd be no explaining it. Yes?
So, the world isn't just all connected, like all the continents?
Correct.
And the ocean?
Correct. There are, think of like a hard-boiled egg. If you have that hard shell, right, and you just barely crack it, it's still together, but there's little fissures or little cracks, right? And that's kind of what the lithosphere is. It's that hard crust on top, and then that upper mantle, and that has kind of cracked a little bit, right? And so it has like, it's not like you have this wide, huge gap. Every once in a while there is, but you have, they're just right next to each other, these plates, and things happen there. The plates can come together, they can spread apart, or they can travel side by side. And we'll get into all that. All right, so the lithosphere is broken into sections, and we call these sections plates. Why plates? I don't know. I mean, when I think of plates, I always think of like dinner plates, like big dinner plates on the dining room table. But they're floating on the asthenosphere, which we know is kind of that thick magma, that molten, melted rock. It's receiving the heat from the core, and that is where the convection currents. It's not a true liquid, but it's that real thick. So when you think of, even like on the Bill 9, when they were showing that lava coming up out of that volcano, and it was all hot and bubbly and thick, that's like the magma, but it's just inside the earth. That is the asthenosphere, and that's what the plates are floating on. And so the plates obviously are lithosphere, which include the crust and that very upper mantle or the very uppermost mantle. And so this rigid layer on top is obviously less dense, resting on that asthenosphere, the plastic-like melted layer that's right below the lithosphere. So it's really important to have a good handle on these layers, because it just helps put all this together and helps it make sense. Because a lot of really cool and dramatic things happen because of this asthenosphere, and because the lithosphere is floating on this asthenosphere. So this is kind of like the pool, and the lithosphere is kind of like a raft that's floating on it in a way. Okay, so plate tectonics is a theory, right? There is a lot of evidence. There's really no other explanation for why some of the things that we see happen here, like what causes them. Well, plate tectonics explains that. And so you have to remember that these theories don't just like automatically happen. Like it has to happen like authentically over time. And so we're going to look at that a little bit this unit too. The idea that we understand it now, we take for granted. I think I've talked about the idea of like explorers. When the explorers first set out, they thought that the earth was flat, right? If the earth is flat and they take off exploring in their big ships, eventually at some point they're going to reach an edge. And if they don't turn around quick enough, they fall off. That's what they thought. I mean, it's pretty amazing to think that they signed up for that, right? Knowing like, hey, we're going to reach the end at some point. Let's go as far as we can, right? What they found, obviously, was that they could make it all the way around. That the earth is not flat, because they could end where they had started, making a complete trip around. And so that was an unbelievable discovery. Imagine, like, you end up back where you started and you didn't fall off the earth, right? You're thinking like, hey, like, I'm not gonna make it. And they made it all the way back.
Should we tell what?
Okay, I'll let her know, thanks.
Claire?
When Bowen's just go to the office, you're gonna get signed out.
And so this was a really amazing thing. They had to adjust their thinking and realize, okay, the earth is not flat, right? There has to be, you know, like they didn't understand gravity holding them. Like there were so many things that they didn't realize. And so they had to adjust that thinking. It's not like we can just be like, nope, I'm Kyrie Irvin. I'm going to say that the earth is flat and I'm sticking with it and nobody can talk me into believing something else. That's not good logic, right? You have to be able to take new information and adjust your thinking and go from there, which the majority of the world from that point on did. Now, you have to get, like, you don't have to just accept everything, but if there's enough evidence and there's enough proof that logically what they're trying to explain makes sense, well then, you know, at that point you probably should go with that. And that's what eventually happened with plate tectonics, yes.
So, if we go over like the edges of the plates, shouldn't it be thinner? Like,
Not necessarily. We'll talk about what happens then, just hang tight. And so Earth's outer shell, or the lithosphere, gets divided up into several major plates that glide or are floating on that asthenosphere, where the convection currents are, that thick magma. And basically the plates kind of act as like this hard, rigid shell compared to Earth's mantle. And again, you can kind of see that in black here, it's showing some of those plates. And a lot of them do kind of go around our existing continents. And so the force believed to move the plates is the convection currents in the asthenosphere. So without the heat, and without having the kind of plasticky molten magma mantle that's allowing for movement, we wouldn't have movement of our plates. Right, so the movement is directly related to having those convection currents caused from the heat inside our Earth. And so when those plates move, a lot of really dramatic events and land features are created. Okay, and so there's several pieces of information that over the years have been kind of discovered that support plate tectonics. And the first one is something called continental drift. And so by the end of what we call the Permian time, about 300 million years ago, all the major continents were together, and they formed a giant supercontinent that was called Pangaea. And so during this time, North America, like that's right here, was situated snugly against Africa. So there was no Atlantic Ocean. Right, it was all one giant landmass, and we'll take a look at that more.
Sounds fun.
Yep. And obviously that's not how things are now. Right. Let's see, is there another? So we're gonna stop there. I wanna show you the brain pop.